Hi everyone, my name is Megan Hall and I'm the Executive Officer for the Youth+ Foundation. Thanks for joining me today as I run you through the PowerPoint from the workshop Increasing Success, a grant writing workshop that was presented in Brisbane and Melbourne to Youth+ staff in 2017. I'll share my screen with you now so that we can run through the PowerPoint. I'm going to be running through this workshop with you in 4 separate parts, shorter installments of the workshop so that it gives you a bit of a sense on how to access grant writing, but also around how to do a really good job of it, but also do it in your own time. I understand that we're all time limited, so shorter snippets of this workshop will work well for most people. So if we can record it in about 4 parts, that should make it more accessible. Part 1 will include an introduction to the Youth+ Foundation. It will also include ways to apply using the Youth+ Foundation or applying directly from your Flexible Learning Centre. And finally, we'll look at the current grant seeking context. What's the environment look like in terms of funding? Who's funding what? And who is our competition when it comes to grant seeking? So let's get started. The Youth+ Foundation was established as a charitable trust to support the broader interests of the community. It does so by supporting quality, innovative education for young people from diverse and complex backgrounds. So we are an arm of Edmund Rice Education Australia Youth+. We're a charitable component. We run our own constitution here and we are managed by a board of management, voluntary board, and operationally, there is an executive officer who performs the functions of the charity, that being me. So basically what our vision is to enable all young people from diverse and complex backgrounds to have equal access to educational opportunities. The Youth+ Foundation performs a number of key functions. One is to support flexible learning centres in the development, matching and the writing of grants. We have starting this portfolio of training programs, and this is just the beginning of how we're going to support flexible learning centres to access and build your capacity to access your own grant writing opportunities. We also have a platform within the shared drive, which is called the document library, the L drive, where you can find all of our components. So you're able to access all of our certificates and all of our bank details, our constitution. Everything lies within the document library, which is accessible to everybody across the Youth+ network, meaning that if you are applying for a grant at the 11th hour and you can't get hold of somebody here in the Youth+ Foundation and you desperately need a certificate of deductible gift recipient status, for example, then you can use our shared drive, our document library under the Youth+ Foundation to access those documents and to understand the foundation a little bit better. Another function of the foundation is governance accountability measure for grants. So we are endorsed as a DGR, a deductible gift recipient 1, and we also have tax concessions with the Australian Tax Office. We have the online central drive, like I said, is the L drive. Within that drive, one of the most important documents in there is a grant log, and it's an opportunity for you, if you are applying for grants, to let the foundation know what it is, who you've applied for, how much money, and whether you've been successful. It's a great little depository of information that we can then use later. But also, if I get asked questions in terms of compliance and accountability, I have all that data in front of me. I encourage you to go on to the Youth+ Foundation file within the L drive and explore it a little bit so you know what I'm talking about. The Youth+ Foundation also provides a public platform for the voice of young people disenfranchised from education. We have a social media profile. So we are registered with Twitter. So we have a Twitter account and we have a profile with Facebook. Please follow us, very easy. search Youth+ Foundation and you'll find us. It's a great little way to distribute information, but also share information around our flexies and some of the stuff that are going on in terms of Youth+ work. Young people often love to see themselves up on Facebook and the work that they've been doing. So please feel free to share some of that stuff with us so that then we can promote it. Who knows who is looking at social media? Who knows what opportunities could arise or what avenues could open when we promote ourselves via social media, obviously with permission of young people. The other thing that the Youth+ Foundation is working on is a national literacy campaign, which will be a pinnacle event each year. At the moment, we're exploring ideas around a campaign called Hook into Books. I think it's important to have a national campaign alongside of a foundation, not unlike Red Nose Day or Jeans for Jeans Day, for example, but something that we can hang our hats on in terms of fundraising, partnership, donor support, but also around lifting the profile of literacy and educational opportunities for young people who have been disenfranchised from mainstream education. This is some of our, this is our Youth+ Foundation. So just like I said, you can explore our social media that way. So I guess the reason that you've hooked into this webinar today is that you want to know, how do I apply? What is it all about? So there are two ways that you can apply for funding. If you have a great grant idea or a project idea, one is as the Youth+ Foundation, and two, you can apply directly as your flexible learning centre. So what does that mean? Let's look at a couple of examples. So the Ian Potter Foundation is a very popular and also pretty well-known philanthropic foundation that actually supports lots of different priority areas, and education being one of them. So for us, this is clearly something that would fit within what we do and potentially something that you would want to access. So basically what we need to do is, when we're looking at the two ways to apply, if we're looking at the Youth+ Foundation versus the Youth+ Flexible Learning Centre, we need to understand that there are things that the Youth+ Foundation have in terms of endorsements that flexible learning centres do not have. So what we need to understand is the eligibility of the grant that we're looking at the time. So if you were to go through the eligibility of the Ian Potter Foundation, you would see that under the terms, Ian Potter Foundation can only make grants to organisations with both deductible gift recipient item 1 and tax concession charity status, meaning that the Youth+ Foundation is best placed to be able to support you to apply for this grant. They are an example of a funder who will only accept applications for organisations with both DGR and TCC. If you wanted to apply for this grant, you would have to apply via the Youth+ Foundation. So this is an opportunity that you can contact the Youth+ Foundation and have a conversation about the grant that you're interested in and go through the eligibility and then work out who it is that we need to apply through. Basically, the Youth+ Foundation in this instant would be a vehicle for you to apply for, a conduit to actually say, yes, we are the Flexible Learning Centre and we are going to deliver a project or a program on the ground for you, but we are using our legal entity in the Youth+ Foundation who have DGR1 and TCC, and therefore we are now eligible to apply for your grant. On the other hand, examples like the Brisbane City Council and often local councils and local government agencies will have no stipulation around DGR or TCC status within their eligibility. So the Brisbane City Council Lord Mayor's Suburban Initiative Fund is an example, if you go through the guidelines and the eligibility, of a grant maker who does not require the DGR status. It's an example of a funder who will accept applications from organisations who don't have that particular status. So this means that you could directly apply straight from your Flexible Learning Centre. This also means that you don't necessarily have to tell the Youth+ Foundation that you're doing this. You can apply for this at any point in time, and that is yours to go ahead with. The benefit of contacting the Youth+ Foundation in these instances is that often people have applied for these funds in the past. Often people have had a very similar idea to you, and often there is an opportunity to potentially build strength on your application, but also for the Youth+ Foundation to assist you in developing that grant up, even if it doesn't come directly from the Youth+ Foundation. It also is a place that we can keep track of what's going on in the Youth+ network around who's been successful and who hasn't, so that we can actually then build our capacity to be more successful in our grants, but also promote the work that we do. So it's always a good opportunity just to run it past the Youth+ Foundation if you aren't very confident with what's going on. So why are you watching this? Yes, show me the money. It is all about how do I access the additional funding that you don't necessarily have in your Flexi to actually make your program come to life. So the overarching intentional goal of grant seeking is to enable the delivery of program or projects or the purchase of resources or infrastructure within your Flexi's mission, within its goals, within its purpose. Successful grant seeking matches and aligns the strategic objectives of a funding body with that of your intended program, project, or purchase. So what you want to do is you actually want to look at what is that grant maker wanting? What are their strategic objectives? What's their mission? Is it in line with what we want? Because if it is, that means that that's going to be a successful grant match for you. We'll walk through this a little bit later in another part of this series, but it really is around successful grant matching. So I know you're eager, and I'm sure in terms of time limitedness that it is always good to just think, I'm going to jump straight in, I've got great ideas, let's get them down on paper. But I urge you to stop and put your pen down. First, let's start talking about what the grant writing process is, and let's get ready for that. So what we can do now in this series is that we will continue to explore some of the ways that you can apply and different funding bodies, but also around what the current climate is. What's the context? Are you application ready? So like I said, have you accessed our document library under the Youth+ file and looked at the documents that you may need so that you're ready and raring to go as soon as that due date comes in, that you aren't chasing up DGR documents or bank details that you need to provide? Have you produced a wish list? Have you talked with your colleagues about what it is that you're actually after in terms of grants? And what does your school need? And then have you matched your grant ID? So this is a great opportunity to then contact the Youth+ Foundation, as we have access to an extensive range of grants and a grant database nationally that then could match your ideas, so that therefore you're applying for the most strategic grant that you can. And have you made contact with the funder? So have you built relationships? So like I said, we will explore these a little bit more down the track, but what we will start with is we will look at the current climate of grant seeking, because this is a great place to start, just to sort of get our heads around who are our competitors. So the current context, currently in Australia, there's over 600,000 not-for-profit organisations, 55 charities are registered in Australia with the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission, or the ACNC. And 17,000 or almost 18,000 of these 55,000 organisations have deductible gift recipient status as endorsed by the ATO. So basically, these are our direct competitors. These are the people in the scheme of things who may be applying for very similar things to us. It's quite a big pool, and we're a little fish when it comes to that. So we just need to be mindful of that. You're probably wondering, what is it about DGR that everybody's so, particular about? The thing about DGR status is it's attractive to potential donors, as it allows grant seekers to receive gifts that are tax deductible to the donor. So if philanthropists want to give us, like the Ian Potter Foundation want to give us $10,000 for a project, giving that to the foundation because of our DGR status means that then they receive a receipt and that their donation is therefore tax deductible for them. Much more attractive. In terms of DGR, there are two types. There's DGR 1 and 2. DGR 1 is a giving charity and DGR 2 is a doing charity. The Youth+ Foundation is a DGR 1. which means we're giving. In terms of a doing charity, we would be looking at like international aid organisations where you're building schools or orphanages or things like that. In terms of giving, what we do is we act as a conduit for the flexible learning centres in terms of giving our donations and our grant seeking successes to some of the most vulnerable young people who have been disenfranchised from education. So, who gives? So there's a number of different buckets of money that go around the place, and a number of different organisations and governments and private enterprise that give. So we're looking at government grants, private foundations, family trusts, corporate foundations, public and private ancillary funds. So for these guys, it's more about the vehicle of transfer of donations. So they may approach Philanthropy Australia, for example, somebody with, you know, a family potentially that has some money to donate, potentially a bequest or something like that, and they then apply to an ancillary fund who then will then distribute those monies on their behalf without it being a big hoo-ha for them. The trustee companies, there's community foundations and giving circles. So in terms of giving circles, it's generally a group of like-minded people who come together, potentially with a little bit of money to donate to somebody, and generally their like-mindedness is around a certain topic. It's topical. So you might have somebody who's around Indigenous charities or homelessness, and then they only receive applications from people who want to give to that type of target group. So government funding versus philanthropic funding. So, you know, community gambling benefit funds in each state are very popular in terms of the way that we apply and accessibility. So government funding will seek to fund accountable best practice organisations with proven track records to deliver services in areas that has identified as priority needs. Whereas philanthropy is more like venture capital. So like the Ian Potter Foundation, they want people to take risks. They want them to be innovative in their processes. They don't necessarily have any stakeholders or voters to please. Whereas government funds, taxpayers' money, you and I pay for the government. Therefore, there's some accountability measures on their behalf for that. So they want best practice records. They want things that have been done, piloted, proven, evaluated. Whereas philanthropy, they're a little bit more kind of edgy outside the box. They want to see something that's not necessarily being done and take a risk. So that's kind of how they get contextualized. So who are we giving to? So as you can see here, these are distributions according to JB Ware. So basically, you can see that we sit quite healthily along there in terms of welfare, culture, and education. You know, some of the front runners in terms of the money that's been given up until 2013, for example. The breakup of donations in Australia. So who is actually giving? So we're looking at individuals, you know, make up the half of the pie here, whether they have, they want it to be tax deductible or claimable by a DGR or not. And then we have the smaller pieces of the pie, bequests, public ancillary funds, public and private, other charitable trusts, and then your corporates and your sponsorships make up nearly the majority of the last quarter of that pie. So we've reached the end of part 1. I hope you're going to join me again for part 2. We'll explore some more planning in terms of the process of grant seeking. Thanks.